Yes, Afundi, we are going to look at putting in one of these side vents. It's more or less the same as doing a center back vent. And you can see here the pattern piece for the under part of the vent is the same as, well, like the lining is the same as the fabric. So there's that. And then the top portion of the vent, just for fashion, I have my vent coming at a bit of an out angle like this rather than straight on. Just makes me feel cool. And the lining there is completely straight. So I've just marked where is the waist so that I can match that on the waist. Here it is, match that on the waist. This should be, I think, 7 centimeters less. No, perfect. Usually this is 5 centimeters less. It's just like during the fitting process, the hem was adjusted a few times. Don't worry about it. At the end of the day, yeah, I'm just matching my waist, and usually here the vent is usually 4 centimeters below the waist, and then 1.5 centimeters seam allowance up. But just everyone's body is different. So with this chap, the vent's a little bit higher. So yeah, at the end of the day, basically this is the original shape of the back piece when I drew the pattern, a little bit more straight here. Then I just added that portion there, but the lining not. So, I've got now this portion of the jacket ready, and you do want to see that these two are matching up quite nicely, and yeah, I'm very happy with that. You do need a little bit of extra. I don't know if that's too much here. See, these are seam. I don't know if I just want to trim that down ever so slightly. Let me look here. See, if I pinch it here, this portion becomes flat. Let me see, what does it look like on this side? Mm, you do need a little bit of extra, but this might just be too much. Oh yes, I actually forgot. Usually when I cut the lining, I'll use this piece to cut the lining. But in this case, just like I said, with the fitting process, things happen. So in this case, let me just see what the F is happening here. Yeah, like I didn't have that, so I actually cut this vent piece just a little bit bigger, knowing that I'm going to come here and trim it down. So let me just figure out what's going on with this hem. I draw this one in. No, I don't. Now, if I straighten that, the hem is going to come out. Do it 6. Let's see this one. It should actually be 7, but I can live on the edge. 6. What if we do 6.5? That's straight and not such drama, but this one's straight. I don't know, should we do it? Should I do 6? No, I want to do 6.5. Okay, so as you know, the bespoke process mixed with the level of cowboy that exists in me, things can be a little bit skew and interesting as we go. So, like I say, you do need a little bit of extra movement in the lining, but too much can be too much. Yeah, I think that's fine, to be honest. Here on the side, that's totally fine. But here on the, that's going to match there. That's fine. Obviously, this is too much. These must be more or less exactly the same. And you see, I'm actually going to cut here this extra portion of the side piece, just so that when it folds up, I'm not going to have a drama. Usually I make sure that this portion here is straight, so when it folds up, it's fine. It's just that there's such a big fold up here because of how um, the whole fitting process went down. Okay, so that one's ready. Let me just do this one time. My brain is a little bit all over the show today. So I'd rather just do this and make sure it's fashion. Right. Now that side piece is going to be fine. It's just this portion of the vent that needs to be okay. So these portions are ready. What we're going to do is attach the back. Let me just get the right piece. This is the right piece. This is the right piece. Look at that. So if I was doing a center back, I would attach the center back separately and then come here to the side piece. So here, as you can see, the cowboyness is kind of crazy, out of control. So I always match from the waist and then just go up and down from there. Whatever happens above and below that must just happen. I feel the waist is the important match and the rest I just trim as I go. Use it, don't use it. Judge me, don't judge me. Whatever works for you. Okay, so here for the vent, I'm going to, I'm going to try and get this portion straight here, just measuring with my eye. I'm not going to stress so much. Kind of measuring with my eye, knowing that this is at 6.5, and we can notch that if we like. 6.5. Notch. So I want this portion to be reasonably straight, like so. And here I have a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, and you see here the edges of this don't match. Don't stress about that for now. For now, just go down 1.5 centimeters and know that actually I'm going to stop 1.5 centimeters above that. So basically exactly in line with where it's cut there, and my seam allowance is 1.5. So I'm just going to stitch a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. I'm going to come here and just backstitch there for now. So I'll do that. I can do the lining one time, and actually I'm a bit pressed for time at this time. So let's look at the lining. Which piece is it? It's this piece. Matching up my waists. Hems match perfectly, which is what I want to see. And again, checking that the hems are flat. I don't want to pin it like that. That would just be insane. So checking that the hems are reasonably flat. And then again, I'm going to stitch, well, this one actually, I'm going to stitch 1 centimeter down from the edge there. So the seam allowance is 1.5, but you'll see in a minute that why this one has to be 1 centimeter. So the actual joint at the end of the day is 1.5, a little bit down from there. But stitching, I'm just going to do 1 on the garment, this portion, not the lining. Seam allowance is 1.5. which I will be stitching in a minute. But for now, I just want to stitch that 1.5 centimeters up. So in other words, avoiding that seam allowance of the vent, just so that I can make sure I've got the vent straight before I go through with the last portion of that. Here you see I've ironed the seam allowance open. I just notched it here on the waist so that this can flip this way, iron that open, and this under portion, I just iron it back the same as the seam allowance. Not 1000% necessary, but it works for me. So that's how I do that. Then this portion, I just kind of lie it how it's going to lie at the end of the day, which is more or less like so. And I make sure that this is now straight, this hem. So there's going to be the hollow of my back. This is going to fold around there. And this, I just want to, and I'm kind of measuring with my eyes, just making sure that that's more or less straight. And I just want to see, these two pieces, so I feel like this under one is going to be a little bit up. So if you see there, this underside of the vent is going to be a little bit up. So I don't want to force them to be the same, because then my whole life is going to be a drama. So you should be able to, if you lie it flat like this, also see the same kind of flatness here, the same straightness here. But I just like to kind of check things as I go. So I'm going to mismatch that a little bit. And then as we were talking, the seam allowance here is 1.5 centimeters. So you come 1.5 centimeters down. Awesome. Thank you so much, Alba. And then, from this under one, from the edge, which you can see is a little bit further back, I just want to make sure I'm about centimeter, maybe 1.5 centimeters from the edge. Let me just, we'll see as we go. So like, let's say from this outside one, it's going to be 2 centimeters back. I'm going to stop stitching there. And here, the reason why I stopped stitching at 1 centimeter, or at the top there, 1.5, was because I want to curve this. I don't want to have a corner there. Because the corner, that's where a lot of tension can build up. And that's where your tear can be. So if you do it in a round like this, your life's just going to be a lot easier. It's going to be a lot more fashion. And people are going to say like, wow, that's super round vent edge that you have there. Not really, no one's going to care. But if it rips, then all of a sudden, they will definitely care. So yeah, again, I'm just mismatching that a little bit. Here's my 1.5. I want to make sure that's round. And then from the edge of the top one, I'm going back 1.5. So that I have this seam here that I can work on. And it needs to be more than 1 centimeter. So I usually make it at least 1.5. Here, after I ironed this, that just line there nicely. So here you can see I've stitched that in a round. I hope you can see that with the blue on the black. Then first thing I did is stretch out this portion a little bit so that we can have an open seam and then one flapping that way, one going straight. You see there, just kind of does a little bit of a curve, so it's good to stretch that out a little bit. Then all I did was open that up, check this is 5 centimeters, and make sure that 5 centimeters goes all the way to the bottom. Now, two things I'm going to do. I'm going to, again, with my eyes, check that straight, and I'm going to fold this up, and it should be 6.5. But you see, I actually want this under one to be a little smidge longer than this top one. So probably just going to end up at 6, and that does make sense. So I can iron this up at 6. I'll usually iron it only half, so that here there really should not be a mismatch here. But if there is a mismatch or whatever, I'm just iron that one time, keep it all straight. So I'll iron that up, and now you see here is the lining coming. So now at the end of the day, we want to join this underlining. together. Now, this it's an interesting development in the lining and the hem. I don't know if I really want to bring this all the way up to join with that hem, because I feel like that's going to give a little bit of tension here. I don't know, because I think if that's all the way up there, that could just give me a little bit of tension there. Shall I risk it? You know my favorite saying that I am a cowboy. I think we'll be okay. Bit of a risk, but why not? So, sometimes I'll just herringbone stitch this and then just stitch that by hand down. If I can, I'll do it one time. So in this case, I feel brave enough. I'm going to do it one time. This portion, if it wasn't such a mismatch, I would be stitching up until I can here. But now, because of this mismatch, I'm a little bit more cautious. So I'm going to just stitch this hem like so. I'm going to start from the edge there. And I'm just going to go straight along. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a stretch because this portion of the hem is a little bit bigger. Because it's such a big hem, it should be 5 centimeters. But, things happen. And I think this seam will just mismatch ever so slightly. Yeah, perfect. So I'm actually just going to come just to this seam. This portion I'll do by hand. I'll see how it wants to fall, and I'll just do it like that. So I'm going to stitch that, and iron that at 6. All right, so you can see there I've stitched it. Here, I could really, if I wanted to get in there and just kind of see where that lining is matching and then stitch that down, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to stitch that by hand. For me, it's just easier like that. So here, okay, so we've got that portion, ironed that up, a little bit longer than this. Okay, so on this underside of the vent, we now want to stitch this portion, and this is about a centimeter seam allowance. So this actually has to come in a way around the front so that it can match there, join there. And this is why we didn't close that whole portion, because we need this amount for the seam allowance. So just matching it from the top there. This is why it's important to check that your lining and your fabric are the same. Then you see here, I'm going to turn up on that notch that we did, making sure that it's all straight on the crease that we folded in. And you see the lining then gets bent in like that one time. So, in this case, I first stitch the lining onto here, onto the hem. You don't actually have to do that, but then once you've sewn it here, it's impossible to get in there by machine. So then you'll have to do it by hand. And I did that for years before I figured out I had to just sew that portion first. So I'm sure there's a lot of those that will change and I'll figure out as I go. Okay, then on the top side, on this back piece, let's just find it. There it is. Here we're going to do a letter edge. I think I have a video on this somewhere, but let's just do it again. Right, so here's the vent portion, here's the hem portion. Maybe let me draw this for you. It's the hem. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is figure out exactly when this folds, where is this corner that it folds to. And we can do it with maths, which is just much more reliable. So whatever this distance is, I know it's 6. I'm going to redraw a parallel line there at 6. This distance was 5, if I remember. So I'm going to draw a parallel line there at 5. So see, there's my exact square, or my exact point when that folds up. Now, perpendicular on this vent portion and touching this corner, we're going to get a line all the way down and see where does it intersect here on the edge. Same here, perpendicular to the hem, touching that corner, where does it come down and where does it intersect here on the hem. So then from this portion, from this intersection to the corner, from that intersection to the corner, and we're going to join those two. So you can kind of join those two intersecting points and the rest will fall into place. But at the end of the day, we're joining those two lines down to the corner. Here we go. So now just stay with me. I'm not 1000% sure, but I'm going to try a different way of putting in the lining here. So I'm not going to go all the way to the end. I'm going to stop about 1.5 centimeters from the edge and just do this portion. Might be a complete farce, but who can know? We'll see. Fashion is always a bit of a journey. So there we have it. See, I've just turned that around, ironed that out. You see this I just ironed so it's like a smooth transition there. You know, usually like I was saying, the hem isn't so high here. So obviously I could have trimmed that down. So this is only 5 centimeters. But then where's that going to go? In the trash. Choke some dolphins. May as well just leave it in the garment. You never know, this guy could have a growth spurt in his 40s. You never know. So this portion here, I'm just going to give a top stitch so that it prevents this lining from, you know, peeking out over there. You can do that by hand if you want to be very fancy. I'm just doing it exactly like that. And you can see here, stitch that portion, and I just left that 1.5 centimeters. Let's see if that makes my life better or worse. So there, I've stitched that down, just maybe a half centimeter seam allowance, doesn't really matter, as long as, yeah, that's stitched down so that this lining doesn't end up pushing out that side. So now here, I really want to line my seam up exactly with the seam of the jacket, so lining up the seam of the lining with the seam of the jacket. Then I'm lining up my edge here. So if I flip this front portion out, you can see here I'm maybe half a centimeter shorter than the actual garment, the lining a little bit shorter than the garment. So you're just going to keep note of that. Now you remember that this part of the vent was 5 centimeters. In other words, the vent is going to end there. And we can just double check that if you look up there, that's exactly where the vent ends. We know that. So now from this 5, I need to go 2 centimeters back. So this is two seams. If you want to do a 3/4 seam, then it's going to be 1.5 centimeters back. But here we're doing a 1 centimeter seam. So it's 2.5 back. I mean 2 centimeters back, meaning from the edge here, it's 3 centimeters. And because this lining is half a centimeter shorter, from the edge of this iron mark, it's going to be 2.5. Easy peasy. So obviously I could have done that on the lining, I mean on the pattern, but you know, it's just easier for me to cut it like this. and then just double check before I cut this too small, or rather cut it too big. Okay, so here at the top we need to just kind of feel where is the corner of our um, vent over here. Ooh, trying to shift this around too much. And this, you can see we stitched 1 centimeter seam allowance down there. So down from this we need to go another centimeter, and then back from this we need to go, our 2 centimeters. So now our edge is there, and we just need to make sure we're not getting too close to this edge. So here where we stitched, we need an extra centimeter down, just to connect here to our line up there, and we just cut this out. Easy peasy. There it is. So now we're keeping this line like so. I'm going to kind of just do a little mark like that, so that I know when I flip this, here's the mark, there's the mark, and that's where it needs to join again. Just that I don't accidentally go higher or lower than I need to. And one more thing here, back on this side, here I just kind of measure with my eyes, 1 centimeter, 1 centimeter, so that I know where to clip this into that corner. So that here, flip it around. Okay, so this portion around the top, easy peasy. So this is going to be 1 centimeter seam allowance. And obviously I'm going to move the notch out like that, so that I can just go up to the top there. Okay, so that part, easy peasy. Here at the bottom though, just a second. So actually, if you rewind, here, just stitch all the way to the edge until I come up with a new solution there. So I just want you to see here, this is coming up about 3.5 centimeters. And I want this to be more or less the same, so about 3.5. So I'm just going to fold it up like that. And here the thing is, if you stitch it like this, just in J like that, then when it flips over, it's looking okay, but you have that little piece of the raw edge there. So here what I like to do is I just give it a little bit of a fold like this. On the lining, it's really soft, so having so many seam allowances, no one will die. So when it folds over, it gives a little cute little corner like that, and then the raw edges a little bit higher up, so it just gets covered by all of that. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just stitch that. Obviously same on the other side, and then we'll finish off this vent in a second. Basically that. So I've stitched that, I obviously just ironed it that way. And then this portion, obviously at the iron, I just ironed it one time. This portion, you just flip underneath there. You can, if you're a very extra person, get in here and stitch that portion by machine. But I have just never seen anyone do that neatly. So you know what's going to happen now. I'm going to do that by hand. And here I just do some external stitching, just to be fash. And I stitch this through all the layers. all of those layers. Right, so I'm going to finish that off, and then I don't do it now because there's still a lot of work to do here, and I don't want to put strain on the stitches. But I'll stitch around here, just a herringbone stitch like a blind hem, just to catch all of this in place. But actually the lining here is going to hold this portion in place. So it's not going to end up flapping all around. That's just, for me, a little bit of extra fanciness of doing the herringbone stitch, the blind stitch, just all the way around that upper part of the vent. But otherwise, that's that. That's how the crumbles biscuit. So yeah, let me finish that off, and then we'll be done. So you see here, depends what I feel like on the day. Today I feel like a prick stitch. So also because, especially with this um, pattern, the prick stitch is quite invisible. So you might not even notice it. Sometimes I'll do a whip stitch. Usually I do a prick stitch. I feel it's the most fashion for this area. And here, the reason I like this method, but it's, not all that specific to this method, it's just really the side vent, is that you're able to make the shape more unique. Let me just knot this off. So on a center back vent, it really does have to be straight. You can't really put any shape there. I suppose you could, but yeah. So here, this portion of the side, you can really bring out to make it a nice curve, which is nice because it means there's more room to open and close here. And I like putting this portion, this top part of the vent, at an angle there. I think it gives a nice shape to the waist once that all comes in. So that's that. There is your lined vent of fashion.